So that's what we're here talking about, is useful self-talk. There is what do expectations, ego, and doing too much have to do with beating yourself up? What's the relationship between those things, and how does it hold you back? Because I think we all have all that. We all do all that. Expectations, ego, and doing too much, we all are, I'm not even going to say guilty, because a lot of it is just human, but we all have those aspects to a certain extent. It's a spectrum. So, I was at a workshop, a class on self-talk, and it was for freelancers and business owners, and it was a very talented Nikki Waters. She's a life coach, she's a former educator, and she had us like in the palm of her hand. It was a small audience in the online setting, in the Zoom, but she had us just like here. And I think the reason for that is partially she was confident, partially she was competent. So there are those things, but also the content. Negative self-talk is such a thing. It's such a thing. And I think there's a misconception that it's not, that positive self-talk, that 100% positive self-talk is a good thing. And I would really disagree. There's toxic positivity, there's just being overly optimistic, there is not seeing the threat. We develop fear and anger and all of these things for reasons, good reasons, right? So we can hear that, listen to it, and discern. However, usually when people experience negative self-talk and that kind of class resonates with them to the point where people are like, man, this is emotional, I'm crying right now, that's because it's a reflection that it's hindering. It is hindering them. It is an impediment to their success and growth. No bueno. Okay, so what do you do about it? So I'm categorizing this into what to know, what to be, how to be. What to know, how to be, and what to do. Know, be, do. I think the importance of self-talk, if I haven't expressed this yet, whatever you say is already reality to a large extent. Because what you say is a reflection of your perspective, and your perspective determines your reality. Is it sinking? Maxwell Maltz wrote a book in 1960 called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it was a lot about perspective and self-talk, and how we see ourselves. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you put it into play, it's going to be in play. So, but a lot of people struggle with this, and I totally get it. I've been there myself. In fact, I think I'm still actively trying to get to a place where it's automatic, and my self-talk is helpful. I'm trying to get to a place where my self-talk is constructive. Because positive or negative, as long as it's doing something positive, and that may be through some less than pleasant thoughts, some not so joyful thoughts, like maybe like having remorse for a mistake, holding myself accountable, holding someone I love accountable. These are all difficult things, right? But They're not exactly fun and playful, but at the same time, they're helpful. Okay. Yeah, as an educator, I practice this a lot, because when you're in the process of helping someone to grow in a way that they are intending, self-directed education, in a way that they are choosing, that process includes a whole lot of guiding and navigating language and belief of self, right? So that's why confidence is such a huge impact of one-on-one self-directed education. Off the Beaten Path Learning provides that one-on-one self-directed, and that kind of education guidance will help a person to transform how they view themselves, how they talk about themselves, and how they talk to themselves. Expectations. I think there are expectations and then there are standards. The thing about expectations is you're never gonna meet them. Ever. Ever, really. Because it's never what we expect. Ever. The discrepancy between what we expect and what reality, like what actually happens, that the bigger the gap, the more upset it causes. So instead of expectations, you can choose. You don't have to. If standards don't get you motivated, if standards don't sound helpful to you, then leave it. Don't do it. Everything is very dependent on you, the independent person. But I would say that, for me anyway, and I would presume for a lot of people that I represent in this way, standards can be a good alternative, a healthier alternative to expectations. And I think if you don't set the standard, then life kind of sets it for you, in the same way that if you don't name yourself in some way, someone else could label you, could identify you in some way. If you don't have if you're not standing in your truth, other people will define your truth for you, and it's not amazing. I mean, they're gonna anyway, but you should have your own version of what that is. We all should. That's only ours to decide. So set your standards for every part of life, and essentially what this means is have a desired output and input, for that matter. Have a desired life, relationships, work, your health, your finances, your all the big areas. Have standards for them. Have a vision for them. But don't expect anything. Because why? Because why? Is it going to work out that way? No. 100,000% no. And I'm not saying that your vision for your life is not going to come to be. Sometimes it does, spot on. Sometimes it's spot on. If you put it out into the world, if you speak of it that way, if you think of it that way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the trick of it is that if you expect it to happen, if you are desperate for it to happen, if you depend on it like that, it's a gross connection. And then it doesn't happen, you're shattered. And for what? Right, okay, so we did that. If you want to get more into like a better explanation from a person that has put way more thought and effort into this is Gawdat. Not totally sure how to say his last name. I apologize, Mo. He was the former engineer of some kind at Google, and now he talks a lot about stress, and he talks a lot about happiness. And his story is heartbreaking and inspiring, and he's hilarious. Anyway, so he speaks about the disparity between expectations and reality, and how it's a setup for disaster. So if you're curious to hear more about that from that perspective, from someone who's really like written a book about it and like done a world tour talking about it, feel free to dive into that rabbit hole. That's what to know, to understand that there are expectations and then there are standards. To understand objectively, that's what to know. That's the theory that you're going to want to know again and again and again and again. You're going to need to repeat it. Let go of expectations. And at the same time, when you have your standards and you meet them and you achieve that, celebrate. This is huge. Celebrate your wins. Pat yourself on the back, especially for the very small things, especially for the very hard things that you didn't want to do or that you didn't enjoy doing. Celebrate out of those. And reflect on the losses. Hold yourself accountable. Accountability is a great way to have self-talk. Because what you're doing is useful. What you're doing is constructive. In terms of how to be, especially with ego, so we all have this thing, we all have an ego, but we all know that too much of it, when it's too big or too, inflated or something, then it can really get in the way of like both our well-being and safety and those around us. Again, this is something to understand, but to really understand to the point of embodiment, know how dangerous ego can be. Look it up. Listen to conversations about it. Look up stories about it. Ryan Holiday has a good, it was pretty recent, posted it on his channel, on his YouTube channel, a speech on a stage he did about ego, and he talks about like David and Goliath, and why was it that, how did David win when he was the smaller, less powerful, he won because he knew what he was up against, and he didn't have the ego that Goliath had. He didn't think he was such hot shit, he didn't need to think about the threat. Again, pointing to how negative thinking or not pleasant thinking can be really helpful, right? So instead of ego, instead of getting caught up in pride and ego, have discernment. Have doubt. Pause. To notice, stay alert, and discern, as one of my learners is working on right now. So that's the to be. Okay. To be is to be discerning. To be discerning in a way where ego is not a part of it. And then what to do. What to do when you want to stop beating yourself up and you want to stop having so much negative self-talk. What to do is you sacrifice. You sacrifice and you focus. And the reason I say this is because sacrifice is misunderstood. Sacrifice is, yes, can be a struggle. Usually inherently it is a struggle. No one inherently is like, yay, I'm sacrificing this. I mean, I feel like that's automatically sarcastic. But it's an investment, because the likelihood is that you are sacrificing for a damn good reason. And so sacrifice and focus on it. Focus on that sacrifice and focus on what you got to focus on. Jocko Willink, who is a former Navy SEAL, and he wrote Extreme, was it Ownership? I think it was. And he also talks about the dichotomy of leadership. Very motivating person. Anyway, so he talks about sacrifice in the context of being a former Navy SEAL, and he says that if you're not the kind of person to take care of your friends, you're not going to make a good Navy SEAL. A good SEAL officer. You're not going to be a good SEAL. That's it. He says if you don't take care of your friends, you're not cut out for this job. Sacrifice and service are a wonderful way to improve self-talk, because essentially you're doing two things at once. You're forgetting yourself and focusing on other people, and you're also building evidence to support the positive self-talk, because positive self-talk and confidence kind of go a little bit hand in hand. And what is confidence? In Portuguese, it's confiança. So if you break that up and you say the etymology of that, it's essentially the ability to believe in yourself with faith of your own ability. Com fé. So you need evidence for that. I mean, people say faith is not based in evidence, but I would say confidence is. You don't have it really if you're not basing it in some logic. My final thought here is, if you're experiencing a lot of negative self-talk, if you are beating yourself up like you would never to another person, like you would never even to yourself, and somehow you catch yourself doing that, saying those things in your head, saying those things maybe out loud, if that's the case, and you're watching this for that reason, one way of transitioning out of that is to make meaning of it. So why? What lesson are you learning? What perspective are you gaining? How is this helpful to me? How is this helpful to the people around me? If you can make meaning of it, then you're already taking one step in the right direction. You're taking the control of the wheel, and you're determining, what is this? You're naming it. You create your reality. That's the whole point of this.